All right, guys. So this morning we're going to talk about understanding the micro world. This is chapter two in ServeSafe, and this is all about the pathogens that make us sick. So we we know that keeping food safe is really important. We talked about health inspections. We talked about why having a good health inspection is good, but here's actually what causes people to get sick the most. And so these are microorganisms and pathogens. This is chapter two, understanding the micro world. First, we need to know that microorganisms, they're small living organisms that can be seen only through a microscope. So, what I tell people is you can't see them, smell them, or taste them. You have to assume that they're there anytime that you're working with food. Now, let me be very, very clear here. I do not want you to sit in the kitchen while mom and dad are cooking and tell them all of the things that they are doing wrong because you learned them in ServeSafe. All right. I always get phone calls from parents or emails from parents saying, "What did you do to my kid? They're telling me that I'm doing all this stuff wrong in the kitchen, and it's stuff that I've always done." Well, let them cook the way they know how to cook. Uh, don't tell them that I told you that they're doing something wrong. Uh, when we talk about ServeSafe, this is about large scale food service. This is about working with 40 pounds of chicken, not 1 pound of chicken. All right. The likelihood of you running into any of these pathogens at home while cooking small, relatively small amounts of food is very, very rare. So you're more than likely going to see things like um, things like pathogens and these things in commercial food service where we're working with a lot of food at a time. So again, don't freak out at the house when mom or dad are cooking and tell them that they're doing all this stuff wrong. This stuff's going to open your eyes to food safety, but it really is designed for commercial food safety. So anytime you hear the word pathogens, you need to think harmful microorganisms. Some pathogens make you sick when you eat them, while others produce a poison or a toxin that can make you sick later on. We have four different types of pathogens, and sometimes this ends up on a test. So I would make sure that you know it: viruses, bacteria, parasites, and fungi. We are going to talk about the word contamination quite a bit. So, contamination is um, when harmful substances, biological, chemical, or physical, get into the food. Um, Food can become contaminated on purpose. Why would someone want to purposefully contaminate food? Well, there's probably a bunch of reasons, but most cases are accidents. So we need to know the word contamination, a very, very important word for us in ServeSafe. The presence of harmful substances, and there are three contamination categories. Most pathogens get into food and onto food contact surfaces because of the way people handle them. So, again, foodborne illness is transferring pathogens from a person to food to another person. And so, really, that's how much of the contamination happens with foodborne illnesses and pathogens is they get transferred by people to food to other people. Food handlers can also pass on pathogens when they're in contact with a person who's sick. We're hearing a lot about that right now, right? COVID. And stay away from people who have symptoms of COVID. The people who have symptoms are supposed to quarantine. And so if they don't quarantine, we potentially can get this COVID from them. Good to some other ways. Some pathogens are passed very easily in these ways: person to person, through sneezing or vomiting, vomiting onto food or food contact surfaces, from touching dirty food contact surfaces and equipment and then touching food. The times that we do this sort of stuff and we don't even know it, it's it's um, it's interesting to watch. Not a whole lot of people vomit onto food, but what we need to know here is that vomit, this particular bodily fluid, um, does easily contain pathogens, and that's why it's important to make sure that if you are vomiting, this gets cleaned up very, very quickly. Symptoms of foodborne illness: diarrhea, vomiting, fever, nausea, abdominal cramps. And then there's one down here called jaundice. Jaundice is the yellowing of the skin or whites of the eyes. Pretty nasty stuff. And so these are what we call universal symptoms. They are excuse me, they're the symptoms um, that we see the most in foodborne illnesses. If you have a foodborne illness, you're not going to have every single one of these symptoms. So you might only have one, you might have none, you might be completely asymptomatic. Nor are the symptoms of foodborne illness limited to this list. We also use a term called onset time. Onset times are how quickly symptoms appear in a person, and they can depend on the type of foodborne illness. You can get this onset time is how long it takes for you to get sick after ingesting some of these pathogens. It can range from 30 minutes to 6 weeks. So you can have a foodborne illness and not know it and not be symptomatic for 6 weeks, which is kind of crazy. But you can also get very sick very quickly within 30 minutes in some cases. And severity of the symptoms can range from diarrhea to death. Um, Death is very rare from foodborne illness, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We have six major pathogens that we talk about. There's over 40 different kinds of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that can occur in food and cause foodborne illness. But of these, six have been singled out and dubbed the Big Six because they're highly infectious. These are the ones that we see the most. They are Shigella, Salmonella, non-typhoidal Salmonella, enterohemorrhagic and Shiga toxin producing Escherichia coli or E. coli, hepatitis A, and norovirus. I will tell you, norovirus is the number one foodborne illness in the country. It makes up over 50% of the foodborne illness outbreaks that are reported. So it's a big one. Pathogens are often found in very high numbers in an infected person's feces and can be transferred to food easily. Food handlers diagnosed with illnesses from these big six pathogens cannot work in a food service operation while they're sick. This is really important um, if you are working in a food service establishment of any kind and you have any of these symptoms, you need to call Ed and let them know. Call Ed and let them know you're sick, and legally, they're not allowed to let you work. So if you're sick with any of these, you can't work in food. You shouldn't be working at all with any of these symptoms, no matter what you're doing. I mean, no one wants to work when they're sick. So call and let them know you're sick. Um, Bacteria. This is our first category of pathogen. It can be found almost anywhere. It lives in our bodies. Some bacteria keep us healthy, others cause illness. Again, you can't see them, smell them, or taste them, so you have to assume that they're there. Growth. Bacteria grows rapidly if fat tom conditions are right, as described in the next few slides. So fat tom is an acronym. Fat tom, each letter of fat tom stands for something different, and these are the conditions in which bacteria grow really well. The F stands for food. Bacteria is like you and me, it needs food to survive. Nutrients such as carbohydrates and proteins. So bacteria doesn't grow on fat. It has nothing to eat. So bacteria is only going to grow on proteins and carbs. TCS food supports the growth of bacteria better than other types of food. This includes meat, poultry, dairy, egg products, and eggs. My question to you is when you go grocery shopping and you bring all that food home, do you know what food has to go in the refrigerator? Of course you do. Why does it have to go in the refrigerator? Because of bacteria. Bacteria, naturally occurring bacteria, um, as well as this dangerous bacteria, will start to break the food down if it's not refrigerated and start to cause it to decay. Then it starts to smell really bad. You're not going to want to eat it. So that's why we refrigerate things. Bacteria does grow at refrigerated conditions. It just doesn't grow very quickly. Acidity. So if you're in if you're in high school chemistry right now, or if you've taken chemistry, you know that this is the pH scale. The pH scale is the acidity scale, acidity and alkalinity. Bacteria grows best in food that contains little. Oh, excuse me, I'm tired this morning. Little to no acidity, and little to no acid. Um, 7.5 to 4.6 is the range of acidity. I know that it's probably not your thing to pick up a cantaloupe or a tomato and look at it and go, oh, it's about a 6.1 on the pH scale. But we know that acid is prevalent in things like citrus, lemons, and limes are highly acidic. And so these items probably won't grow bacteria very well. But bread, raw chicken, cantaloupe, milk, cooked corn, these items are perfect for bacteria growth. And so these are the things that you really need to make sure that you're treating them very well. Cantaloupe fits fat tom conditions perfectly. And one of the most dangerous foods that you can eat if it's been time and temperature abused, if there's a presence of bacteria, please, please, please don't go into the refrigerator and throw out all the cantaloupe because I said it will kill you. It will not, unless it is time and temperature abused. But we'll see. We'll see what all that means in just a couple of minutes. You really have to try to mistreat these things in order for the bacteria to um, um, make them unsafe. So the first T is temperature. Bacteria grows rapidly between the temperatures 41 and 135, which is known as the temperature danger zone. This is really important for you to know. This is on almost all the tests that we give is the temperature danger zone. So you need to know what the temperature danger zone is. You also need to know the red zone. The red zone is bacteria grow even more rapidly from 70 to 125. The red zone. Bacteria growth is limited when food is held above or below the temperature danger zone. So if you're holding your food in the refrigerator at under 41 degrees, which most refrigerators are set to like 34, 35 degrees. So that's plenty cold as long as it's below 41, that's fine. And then above 135. 135 is really not that hot, but we're saying that bacteria is still going to grow in these conditions. It's just not going to grow as quickly as it would if the food was held between 41 and 135. The second T is time. Bacteria needs time to grow. So if there's, once you cut a cantaloupe and that cantaloupe hits room temperature, it's not immediately unsafe. It's going to take some time. The more time bacteria spend in the temperature danger zone, the more opportunity they have to grow to unsafe levels. So again, T in this case is time. Bacteria needs time to grow. It's not going to just automatically grow to an unsafe level immediately. It's going to take a little bit of time. We'll talk about that in later chapters. O is oxygen, just like you and me. Bacteria needs oxygen to survive. One of these oxygen, so one is aerobic bacteria, and others are anaerobic bacteria, meaning aerobic, they need oxygen, anaerobic, they don't need oxygen to grow and survive. Bacteria that grow without oxygen can occur in things like cooked rice, untreated garlic and oil mixtures, and temperature abused baked potatoes. And then for me, this is how I always tell if a food is a TCS food, a time and temperature controlled for safety food. Moisture. Moisture is a really good really good identifier of a TCS food. Bacteria grows well in foods with high levels of moisture or water. The amount of moisture available in food is called water activity. This scale ranges from 0.0 to 1.0, water itself being a 1.0. Food with a water activity of 0.85 or higher is ideal for water growth. So what we're saying is 85% of that food needs to be water or moisture in order for bacteria to really grow and thrive. But when you think about it, a lot of your fruits and vegetables, high water content. Animal-derived muscle meat, animal-derived protein, 88% to 90% water. So with most of it being water, that's why animal-derived proteins, meat, fish, that sort of thing, are really at risk for bacterial growth. Again, there's some toxin production. Some bacteria produce toxins in food as they grow and die. People who eat the toxins can get sick, and cooking may not destroy these toxins. The prevention, the best way, and this is a test question, it's a quiz question, it's always a question. The best way to control bacteria is to control time and temperature. Keep your food cold. Don't let your food sit out in the temperature danger zone for too long. Okay? So let's go to the chat. Set your chat to everyone. Make sure that when you open that up. And here comes the first question. What is the temperature danger zone? Answer that in the chat. What is the temperature danger zone? Let's see who is listening. Again, set your chat to everyone, not to direct message me, please. Okay, so let's take a look back at the slides. So I think that you probably got, for those of you that said 41 to 125, you probably got the red zone. 70 to 125, and the temperature danger zone 41 to 135, you probably got that mixed up, and that's okay. So you're right there. What I was impressed with was that you got the 41 degree part right. We call that the bottom of the temperature danger zone. And the top of the temperature danger zone is 135. So this is the entire zone. And then the red zone is the zone within the temperature danger zone. 70 to 125 is within 41 to 135. And this is where bacteria doubles every 20 minutes. So, yes, you need to keep food out of the temperature danger zone, but you really need to make sure it's out of the red zone. Good job, guys. Bacterial growth can be so you don't really need to know lag, log, stationary, and death. This seems to be more of the science part of it. So we've talked about the big six. We're going to, and the FDA has identified four types of bacteria, two viruses that are highly contagious and can cause severe illness. Food handlers diagnosed with illnesses from these bacteria can never work in a food service operation. The first one is Salmonella typhi. Salmonella typhi only lives in humans. Eating a small amount of it can make a person sick. Severity of symptoms depend on the health of a person and can live in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. All of these, you're going to see these repeated in the next few slides because this is pretty much standard for all of these things. It doesn't take a lot of this to make you sick. And, depending on how healthy you are, can depend on how severe your symptoms get. And then, I know it's not something that is pleasant to talk about, but these things can live in a person's feces for weeks. And so all of these foodborne illnesses travel through what we call the fecal oral route. And it's people not washing their hands after using the bathroom correctly, and then transferring that bacteria through feces and feces maybe on their fingers over to food. So terrible thing to think about, but unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Salmonella typhi, the food that is linked with this bacteria, ready-to-eat food, beverages, things that are touched with hands. Symptoms: high fever, weakness, abdominal pain, headache, loss of appetite. Sometimes there's a rash. Prevention measures: exclude food handlers who have been diagnosed, wash hands, and cook food to minimum internal temperatures. What's really nice about bacteria is that you can reduce these pathogens or kill these pathogens completely through proper cooking. So we say we cook through minimum internal temperatures, and that is what can reduce these pathogens. Now, go on. Now, making me crazy, dogs. Shigella. Shigella is the next one, and is an interesting one. Found in the feces of humans with the illness, and flies can transfer this bacteria from feces to food. We know that flies love feces, and if they land on them, if they are around them, they can spread this bacteria to food. Eating only a small amount can make a person sick. High levels of the bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. So, we're gonna see a lot of these. Food linked with the bacteria: food that is easily contaminated by hands, food that has made contact with contaminated water, such as produce. The symptoms: bloody diarrhea, abdominal pain and cramps, and occasionally you see a fever. Vomiting and diarrhea, definitely with this one as well, or vomiting as well. Prevention measures: exclude food handlers who have been diagnosed, exclude food handlers who have diarrhea, Wash hands, control flies inside and outside of the operation. So this is E. coli, and a couple big points about E. coli is that it can be found in the intestines of cattle. This is actually where it starts. So in cows, and can contaminate the meat during the slaughtering process. It also is found in infected people because that's where the bacteria goes to multiply and to produce its toxin. Eating only a small amount can get you sick. Once eaten, uh, it produces toxins in the intestines, which cause the illness. Bacteria is often found in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended, so pretty nasty stuff. Ground beef is what this food is the food linked with this bacteria. Raw ground beef, undercooked ground beef, contaminated produce, symptoms, diarrhea, eventually becomes bloody. Great. Abdominal cramps, kidney failure in severe cases. So if it's not treated and it's left to get even worse, it can cause kidney failure. Great. Prevention measures exclude food handlers who have been diagnosed, cook food to minimum internal temperatures, purchase produce from approved reputable suppliers, and prevent cross-contamination between raw and ready-to-eat meat or food. And we'll talk about cross-contamination and what that is in later chapters. Non-typhoidal salmonella, this is the one that is the most popular salmonella. Many farm animals carry Salmonella spp naturally. The bacteria is often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. You have diarrhea, abdominal cramps, vomiting, fever. And if you need to prevent this, you're cooking poultry and eggs to minimum internal temperatures, prevent cross-contamination, keep food handlers who have been diagnosed out of the operation. Food commonly linked: poultry, chicken, turkey, duck, eggs, dairy products, and produce. So again, lots of farm animals will carry this stuff, but we see this predominantly in poultry products: chicken, turkey, duck, and eggs. Other bacteria, there's some others that are in this category as well, that are not part of the big six, but we do see some of this. Bacillus cereus. Bacillus cereus, we see this cooked vegetables, meat products, milk, rice, Bacillus cereus. Listeria monocytogenes. This can cause miscarriage in pregnant women. So this is why pregnant women will typically stay away from deli meat, hot dogs, soft cheeses, raw milk cheeses that aren't pasteurized. Grows in cool, moist environments, found in dirt, water, and plants. So this stuff is around, but there's a reason that especially pregnant women don't eat certain things, and it's just to keep them away from Listeria monocytogenes. Campylobacter jejuni. This is a weird one. Cook food, particularly poultry, to required minimum internal temperatures. Food commonly linked: poultry, contaminated water, meat stews, and gravies. Campylobacter jejuni. Well, I'm surprised. No. Well, it's a weird one too. Poultry, it has very similar symptoms to salmonella. Clostridium perfringens, found in dirt, carried in the intestines of both humans and animals. Cool and reheat food correctly, hold food at correct temperatures. This one is similar to E. coli, except it does not produce a toxin. So because it produces really terrible intestinal issues, some people confuse it for E. coli, but you got to typically you have to get a blood test in order to confirm. Clostridium botulinum. This is botulism. Botulism we used to find in canned items a lot, but because of the advances in canned food production, we don't see botulism a whole lot anymore in canned items, canned food. But we will see it incorrectly canned food, reduced oxygen packaged food, temperature abuse, vegetables like baked potatoes. So, botulism, for some strange reason, um, we see this in baked potatoes most often. Staphylococcus aureus. This is an interesting one too because this can be found in humans, particularly the hair, nose, and throat, and in infected cuts. This one actually, 50% of healthy adults will naturally carry this bacteria on them. So making sure that, and this is called staph infection. If you get a staph infection, and especially this is rampant in hospitals, staph infection is really tough, and it's kind of difficult to kill it. A lot you got to get on some strong antibiotics. Uh, I don't think I'm gonna try to recite these. Um, we'll just move to viruses. We'll move to viruses and then we'll wrap it up. This chapter really is about bacteria and viruses and understanding the difference in the two. So the basic characteristics of viruses, they can be carried by humans and animals. They require a living host to grow. All right, so they're not going to grow on food, but they can be transferred through food and remain infectious in food. You can get a virus from food, water, or any contaminated surface. Um, some of these viruses last on surfaces for a long time. So making sure that surfaces are cleaned and sanitized, this is going to be a great way to reduce these pathogens. Again, foodborne illnesses caused by these typically occur through fecal oral routes. So this is, again, food handlers not washing their hands after using the restroom. They have feces on their fingers, and they are touching food and spreading the virus that way. Can be transferred from person to person, from people to food, and from people to food contact surfaces. When a customer gets a virus, it's usually because their food was handled by an infected person, which that person could be a food handler, a staff member, anyone else who has the virus. People carry viruses in their feces and transfer them to their hands after using the restroom. So, again, it's gross, but that's why hand washing is so important. Prevention measures, viruses are not destroyed by normal cooking temperatures. It's important to practice good personal hygiene when handling food and food contact surfaces. Quick removal of vomit is also important because vomit can transfer pathogens as well. Best ways to prevent the spread of viruses, um, don't let people work sick. Make food handlers wash their hands regularly and correctly. The key word there is correctly. Avoid bare hand contact with ready to eat food. One is hepatitis A. Hepatitis A mainly found in the feces of people infected with it. It can contaminate water and many types of food. The virus is often transferred to food when infected food handlers touch food or food equipment with fingers that have feces on them. So I call them feces fingers. Terrible to think about, but that's why hand washing, again, is so important. And cooking does not destroy hepatitis A. Food linked with the virus, shellfish from contaminated water, ready to eat food. Um, Hepatitis A symptoms, mild fever, general weakness, nausea, abdominal pain. And then jaundice is a symptom, again, yellowing of the skin or whites of the eyes. If you've not ever seen jaundice in person, it's pretty terrible. So Google jaundice and check out the images. It's pretty bad. Prevention measures exclude staff who have been diagnosed, exclude staff who have jaundice. If someone comes to you and they say, I'm not feeling so good, and they look a little yellow, get them out of there. Speaking of getting them out of there, you out. Go on. You make it. Go to your dog bed. Go to your dog bed. Stay there for a couple minutes. Thank you. Life with dogs, right? Wash hands. Avoid bare hand contact with ready to eat food. Purchase shellfish from approved, reputable suppliers. Norovirus, again, is the number one foodborne illness in the country. Again, it makes up over 50% of the reported foodborne illness outbreaks. So it's a big one, and this is the one we see most often. Often transferred to food when infected food handlers touch food or equipment with fingers that have feces on them. Eating only a small amount can make you sick. This one has a very quick onset time as well, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. So chances are you know what you ate and where you ate it from if you get norovirus. Eating only a small amount can make you sick. People can become contagious within a few hours after eating it. The virus is often in a person's feces for days after symptoms have ended. So you can feel great, but still have this virus um, in you. Food linked with the virus, ready to eat foods, shellfish from contaminated water, symptoms, vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, abdominal cramps. And typically you get all of these at the same time. It's terrible, it's horrible, and it's very quick. Prevention measures: if a staff member's been diagnosed with it, you need to exclude them from the operation. They cannot come to work. If they have diarrhea and vomiting, they need to go home. They cannot work around food. Same thing is if you're in our kitchen at the school and you come to me and say, I'm suffering from diarrhea or I've been vomiting all night, I can't let you in the kitchen, and I don't want you even close to me really because I don't want to get that. Wash hands, avoid bare hand contact with ready to eat food, and purchase shellfish from approved reputable suppliers. So that's norovirus. We also have some parasites. Parasites, I think that the thing here to know is that they're commonly associated with seafood and wild game. I was talking to my friend Charlie over at Clean Catch Seafood Market, and he was saying, "Man, he goes, there's some fish we won't even get in because of the worms." He goes, "A lot of these fish have worms and little nematodes," and he goes, "While some of them are harmless, is I don't want to deal with those." So some fish can get worms; those are parasites, and pretty nasty stuff. Purchase food from approved, reputable suppliers. But even if you're getting fish out of the ocean from a fisherman who's approved and reputable, he's not, or that fisher person is. There's no way for them to know if that fish is riddled with worms or not. So it's a chance you take. Cooking food to required minimum internal temperatures is also important. You can kill these parasites by cooking, and some of the parasites, you don't even know that you're eating them. Make sure that fish will be served raw or undercooked, like sushi fish, has been correctly frozen by the manufacturer. Freezing will also kill these parasites, and so any food that you're going to serve raw or undercooked, like again sushi fish, um, that has to be correctly frozen. Here's Anasaicus simplex. Food commonly linked to it is raw and undercooked fish, cod, herring, halibut, mackerel, Pacific salmon. Most common symptoms: tingling in the throat and coughing up worms. Wow, coughing up worms. That's kind of crazy. Prevention measures: cook fish to minimum internal temperatures. If serving raw or undercooked fish, purchase sushi grade fish that has been frozen to the correct temperature requirements. It's pretty gross. Um, these are just um, a bunch of different uh, parasites. Giardia. Giardia is water, correctly treated water. Yeah. Cyclospora. You get different kinds of fungi. So this is our last category. Fungi includes yeasts, molds, and mushrooms. So some of these things are edible, some are not. You want to make sure that you're not serving any moldy food. Um, if you don't recognize a mushroom, don't eat it. Um, some mushrooms can produce serious toxins and really hurt you, while others are delicious and produce no toxins. If you don't know the difference between them, you walk upon a mushroom, don't just pick up a mushroom and eat it. Molds. We do see mold quite a bit in food. Um, so some mold produces toxins while others don't. Molds grow under almost any condition. They grow particularly well in acidic foods. So while bacteria and while bacteria doesn't grow in acidic foods, mold definitely can. And um, mold doesn't necessarily like cooler or freezer temperatures, but those temperatures just slow the growth. It doesn't stop the growth. We have yeasts. Yeast is natural. There's yeast in the air, and yeast loves sugar. That's what yeast eats. Yeast eats sugar, and it produces two things. It produces alcohol, and it produces carbon dioxide. So yeast is really important in wine production and beer production, in alcohol production. It's really good for bread production. But if you have something like, um, a jar of preserves, jam, and it's been left uncovered, some natural yeast could get in there and start to ferment it, start to turn it into alcohol. Um, And then there's some seafood toxins. We won't dive into those. They are included in the notes, so you do need to go through these. Um, some great points about them, though. Toxins cannot be destroyed by cooking or freezing. Um, yeah, and then there's a bunch of different toxins. So, it's just eating food, and eating food can be dangerous. But if we know a lot about this stuff and a lot of the prevention measures, cooking food to minimum internal temperatures, purchasing food from approved reputable suppliers, these are all things that we need to um, pay close attention to. So,